everyone, this is Carly Hasselfeld for Logic of Inquiries, Week 13 reading assignments. This week I read Marjorie L. DeVault's chapter entitled Writing and Rhetorical Strategy. The overall goal of this text is to give the reader a comprehensive overview of the challenges women face when writing academic papers, conducting research, or legitimizing their work and knowledge. DeVault provides a way to help readers understand the balancing act women or other feminists must perform in order to legitimize their work or have authority over their knowledge and expertise. DeVault provided examples from two different feminist sociologists who have attempted to present their knowledge in different ways to the male-dominated field and went through the pros and cons of each attempt. From there, she also analyzes the act of silencing, what silence means, how feminists have perceived it or tried to navigate around it, and the impacts it has had on their feminist work. She also goes into detail to help the reader understand the methods in which other feminist sociologists have used to speak up for themselves and their work. The point of this chapter is to help the reader understand the different methods feminists have used in the past in order to gain respect or authority in their respective fields and the effectiveness of each method, and help maybe a budding feminist understand what would be the appropriate approach for them, or what have other feminists done in the past to get them to where they are today. Something that I really appreciated in DeVault's chapter is that she only showcased feminist sociologists' work and the different challenges that they've had to overcome and how they've overcome those specific challenges, or the reasoning behind why they chose to present the work the way that they did. DeVault was also able to encapsulate the ecosystem of feminist work and the impact it has had on the field of sociology, as well as other scientific fields of work. And towards the end of the chapter, it kind of brings everything back together and gives a suggestion or paths other feminists can follow in order to achieve their needs of authority in their respective fields and help them have an informed voice and own the knowledge that they've created. One of the assumptions that DeVault makes is that feminists working in a field of science or other male-dominated industries need to acknowledge their feminist limits and use them to gain advantage or achieve a goal. To quote, "Speaking up gently, with care, may seem contradictory or weak, too womanly a goal for social science. But new understanding suggests the acknowledge the limits of our authority will produce stronger forms of knowledge. Writers who wish to challenge prevailing arrangements will need to develop other voices." My question to DeVault would be, does this work? Does by playing by the rules actually help women advance their authority in these respective fields? And what else needs to change now that we've gone into the 20th century, where feminist movements are hopefully more accepted in the fields of work, and as women start to dominate and represent their fields of science more so than men now? I also thought about the book Other Please Specify and how it talked about now that women are dominating the field of knowledge and maybe have finally reached that inner circle, that they are in fact starting to silence other minority voices. And it makes me wonder, did they follow the rules too much that if they allow new voices to come in, all of their work is delegitimized and essentially a moot point? Just food for thought after reading this chapter. What's agreeable to me in this chapter is sometimes you have to play by the rules in order to break them. For example, DeVault pulled from two feminist sociologists who wrote their papers in very different ways. One feminist wrote her paper in the more traditional academic stance that would be probably more accepted by the men reading her work and the journals who would be publishing her work, whereas the other feminist took a very wildly different approach by presenting her research more as the way that the data came in through conversations. And I believe they refer to it, she wrote it almost like the gossip or the chit-chat that happened between these women, and allowed the reader of her work to interpret the knowledge rather than her stating what you're supposed to get from it. And I agree that creating new forms of writing does have its pros and cons, because it allows for you to present knowledge in a new way and maybe allow for more interpretation and less false generalizations. But then there also is an issue when you're trying to meet the requirements that have been established by the male-leaning system, because you're only playing into that system rather than trying to change it to more of an inclusive environment. And lastly, I can understand why DeVault has an underlying fear that all of the work being done by feminists who might be considered fringe or too out there will eventually fall away in order to meet the standards that have been established by the previous owners of the fields and the publishers who have been publishing very specific types of work and the formats that have been followed in order to create those standards that anyone working in the field have to meet. What's arguable about this chapter, honestly, I did agree with basically everything that DeVault had to say, and since I'm relatively new to this field of feminine work, I don't have enough knowledge to maybe disagree with something, but I did want to make the point that hopefully sociologists are not trying to find that right or universal method to help women or feminists establish knowledge and authority, because I believe it cannot be universal for all feminists. I believe that there are too many variables in the audience type, field of work, choice of topic, and accredited publishers for there to be a successful uniform method of establishing authority and ownership for feminists. I believe this is probably true for everything, is that you can't get into the specific generalizations because then you start to miss out and become uninclusive and create a whole new problem for emerging sociologists who might have a different perspective on how to conduct their work. So again, I have agreed with pretty much everything that DeVault had to say, and I'm curious to know that if there is an approach for feminists that are trying to build a universal theory or method in which they present their work to help other people establish authority over their knowledge. What's aspirational is that there's a strong foundation to build from for any feminist or minority researcher who is trying to establish a voice. Feminists have been working to establish authority for centuries, and their efforts are finally not going unnoticed. And then what I think about this after reading this article is how can I find my own voice or authority in my work? Even though the field of design is increasingly becoming more inclusive, it is still a predominantly male field. And so after reading this, I am encouraged to read more into how feminists have made this approach and what I should do on a personal level to achieve authority over the knowledge that I own and create. And lastly, I'm looking forward to learning how can I help other feminists achieve confidence and knowledge in their work. Overall, I really enjoyed this chapter, and I'm very thankful that I read it during this week because I am currently writing my thesis now, and this kind of gave me that extra boost of confidence I needed to really trust in the way that I'm forming and telling my story in my research. And this concludes my analysis on DeVault's writing and rhetorical strategy. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to talking with all of you on Monday.